Hello and welcome to Good Seeds, where I will be reading the Jesus Storybook Bible along with the corresponding scriptures. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you along. Today's story is going to be filled full. The feeding of the 5,000, and this story comes from Matthew 14, Mark 6, and Luke 9. There once were 5,000 tired and hungry and probably very grumpy people sitting on a hillside wanting their dinner. They'd come to hear Jesus that day. They came before breakfast, stayed all morning, all afternoon, and way past dinner. No one had meant to be out there that long, but that's how it was, listening to Jesus, as if time didn't exist. People could listen to Jesus for hours, and on this particular day, that's just what they did. But they hadn't brought enough food, and they couldn't just go and buy themselves a burger and fries to go because, of course, they were in the middle of nowhere, with no shops or restaurants. Besides, that kind of food wasn't invented yet. What would they do? Jesus' friends had an idea. Let's send everyone home for dinner. They don't need to go, Jesus said. You can give them something to eat. Did Jesus want them to travel all the way to town and buy food for everyone? Jesus' friends panicked. But we don't have enough money. What food do you have? Jesus asked. Go and see. Now there was a little boy in the crowd. He had brought a lunch that his mother had made for him that morning. He looked at his 5 loaves and 2 fishes. It wasn't much, not nearly enough for 5,000, but it was all that he had. I have some, he said. Jesus' friends laughed when they saw his little lunch. That's not nearly enough, they said. But they were wrong. Jesus knew it didn't matter how much the little boy had. God would make it enough. More than enough. Jesus said, Bring me what you have. And so the little boy gave Jesus his lunch. Jesus winked at the little boy and whispered in his ear, Watch. How in the world would Jesus feed everyone with just that? Jesus' friends said, because they thought it was impossible. But Jesus knew the one who made all the fish in the oceans, and Jesus knew the one who in the very beginning had made everything out of nothing at all. How hard would something like this be for someone like that? Jesus took the little boy's lunch, looked up to the heaven, and thanked his Father. Then Jesus gave the little lunch back to his friends. As Jesus' friends started to hand out the food, do you know what? It was the strangest thing. No matter how much they broke off, there was always more, and more, and more. Enough for 5,000. Everyone ate as much as they wanted. 2nd helpings, 3rd helpings, even 4th, until they were full. And still there were leftovers. Well, Jesus did many miracles like this. Things people thought couldn't happen, that weren't natural. But it was the most natural thing in all the world. It's what God had been doing from the beginning, of course. Taking the nothing and making it everything. Taking the emptiness and filling it up. Taking the darkness and making it light. Such a good story. And now we're going to read the corresponding scriptures, and I will be reading out of the NIV Bible. Now, you could find the scriptures in a couple different places. This is repeated throughout the Gospels. It is in Matthew 14, Mark 6, and in Luke 9. I am going to be reading out of Matthew, and it starts in Matthew 14, Verse 13, Jesus feeds the 5,000. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him. on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to ask him, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy something for themselves to eat." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides the women and children. So here we see that there was even more than 5,000 because there were also women and children. And I love that there's 12 basketfuls left, which 12 is a pretty biblical number. And I'm not sure if, the disciples then ate out of each basket, but this story is just such a great reminder that sometimes when we doubt what God is capable of, he can truly amaze us. We think that we don't have enough or we aren't enough, but in this story we're reminded that we have a God who can multiply, and that if we give thanks to him and look to him, that he will provide what we need. That is a promise that is in his word over and over again, that our God is a provider. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me today for our reading, and I hope that you all have a blessed day, and Lord willing, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.